Picture this. March 25, 1941, and a young woman's hands are shaking as she holds a piece of paper with 23 letters on it, arranged in neat 5-letter blocks that looked like complete nonsense to everyone else in Britain. But Mavis Lever, just 25 years old and brilliant with numbers, had just figured out something incredible. These letters weren't random at all. They were a message, and she knew exactly what they said. The Italian Navy's entire battle fleet was sailing straight into a trap, and she was the only person in the world who knew it was coming. She didn't walk down that hallway in the old converted mansion. She ran, sprinting past rooms filled with dozens of other young women bent over their desks, scribbling letter frequencies and working out probability calculations, past locked doors where massive mechanical computers called bombs clattered away day and night, testing thousands of possible solutions every single hour. She burst through Dilly Knox's door without even knocking, barely able to catch her breath, saying, "Dilly, Dilly, I've got it." Knox was a veteran codebreaker who'd been cracking secret messages since before the war even started. And when he looked up from his desk and took that decrypt from her hands, when he actually read what it said, you could see his entire face change because he understood immediately what this meant. This moment, this exact instant, when meaningless gibberish suddenly transformed into crystal clear meaning. This happened hundreds and hundreds of times across 4 brutal years of war at a place called Bletchley Park. And every single time it happened, it never stopped being absolutely shocking because what they were reading, these secret enemy messages, were often more terrible and more devastating than anyone could have possibly imagined. The whole incredible story started in a mansion out in Buckinghamshire that the British government bought in 1938 for £5,500, a red brick Victorian building that honestly looked pretty ugly, like someone's weird country house that nobody really wanted. Bletchley Park sat about 50 miles northwest of London, close enough to coordinate with the capital, but far enough away to be safe from bombing raids. And by September 1939, right when the war started, it housed something called the Government Code and Cipher School, and about 200 people who'd just been handed what seemed like a completely impossible mission: break Enigma, read Germany's top-secret military communications, and do it fast before Britain lost the war. The Enigma machine itself looked innocent enough, kind of like a typewriter sitting inside a wooden box. But here's how it worked. You'd press a key, and electrical current would flow through something called a plug board, then through 3 spinning rotors that could be arranged in 60 different positions, with each rotor having 26 possible starting spots, and then a light bulb would illuminate a letter, and that letter was your encrypted code. The brilliant and terrifying part was that these rotors advanced with every single keystroke, which meant the encryption was constantly changing, never the same twice. The mathematics behind it were absolutely staggering, with 3 rotors chosen from a set of 5. Plus all those plug board connections, Enigma had over 158 million possible settings. The Germans were absolutely convinced it was unbreakable, that no human being could ever crack it. And honestly, they were almost right. They were only wrong by the smallest margin imaginable. Polish codebreakers had actually managed to break the early versions of Enigma way back in 1932. And they'd been working on it in complete secrecy for 7 whole years, never telling anyone what they'd accomplished. Then, in July 1939, with German tanks about to roll across their border, they made one of the most important decisions in history. They shared absolutely everything with British and French intelligence, handed over working Enigma replicas, all their methods, every insight they'd gained. And this gift of information would turn out to be one of the most important intelligence transfers in all of human history. But there was a problem. The Germans kept improving the system, kept making it harder, adding new rotors, creating more complex plugboard settings. And the naval version of Enigma added a fourth rotor, which made everything exponentially more difficult. And each time they made a change, the codebreakers had to start over from scratch, back to square one. Alan Turing arrived at Bletchley Park in September 1939. 27 years old and already recognized as an absolutely brilliant mathematician. And he looked at the Enigma problem completely differently than everyone else had been looking at it. He saw that the machine's strength was its incredible variability. All those millions of possible settings. But here's the key insight. That variability followed rules. Mathematical rules. And rules could be exploited. Rules could be broken. He designed something called the bomb, an electromechanical computer that could test thousands of rotor positions incredibly rapidly, searching for contradictions and impossible combinations. If a setting produced letter combinations that couldn't possibly be right, it would eliminate that setting and move on to test the next one, and the next one, and the next one, over and over. The first bomb, which they called Victory, started operating in March 1940, and it was massive. 6 feet tall, 7 feet long, weighed an entire ton, and when it ran, it sounded like 1,000 knitting needles all clicking away at once. It worked slowly at first, but then it got faster as more bombs came online, and the codebreakers got better at their techniques, learning and improving every single day. The first major breakthrough into German Army Enigma came in January 1940, and the actual message they decrypted was pretty boring. Just a weather report. But it proved something crucial. The system actually worked. They could really do this. Over the next months, more breaks came. More messages were decoded. Supply requisitions, movement orders, casualty reports, the everyday functioning of the German military machine. Each decrypt was called a flimsy because they printed them on super thin paper that could be destroyed really quickly if necessary, burned or dissolved without leaving evidence. Gordon Welchman, a mathematician from Cambridge, started reading those early flimsies and noticed something that all the pure math people had completely missed. The messages formed a network, a web of communication. Units would report to headquarters. Headquarters would issue orders back to units. The same call signs kept appearing over and over. And if you mapped those relationships, if you understood who was talking to whom, you could predict where to look for the most important messages, what cribs might work, which communication links were the most valuable. He created an entire intelligence system around the decrypts, a whole new science they called traffic analysis, studying who was talking to whom, when, how often, and sometimes that metadata, that information about the information, turned out to be even more valuable than the actual message content itself. By May 1940, as Germany invaded France and the war intensified, Bletchley was reading some Luftwaffe traffic on a regular basis. Not all of it. Not quickly enough, but enough to provide warnings of major air operations coming. Enough to actually matter. Enough to save lives. The messages themselves were startlingly, almost shockingly direct and clear. German military communications were professional, efficient, incredibly detailed. And here's the thing. They didn't use fancy codes within the cipher. They didn't disguise things. They assumed Enigma was completely unbreakable. So they just wrote plainly, in normal language. Luftwaffe pilots would report their exact targets, their bomb loads, how much fuel they had left. And Army units would describe their precise positions, their casualties, what supplies they desperately needed. The Germans were literally telling the British everything, revealing their entire military situation, never knowing that anyone was listening, never suspecting that every word was being read. Hugh Alexander, a chess champion who got recruited to Bletchley, later described what reading these decrypts felt like. And he said it was like playing chess when you could see all your opponent's pieces and exactly what they were planning. But your opponent couldn't see yours at all, couldn't even imagine you were watching. But here's the thing that haunted them. The weight of that incredible advantage was absolutely crushing. Joan Clark, one of the very few female codebreakers working directly on Enigma, remembered breaking a message one day that gave detailed casualty reports from a bombing raid on London. And the German report was precise, clinical, cold. So many buildings destroyed, so many casualties estimated, and the raid had happened just the night before. She'd actually heard those bombs herself. Distant thunder rumbling from Bletchley. And now here she was, reading the bomber crew's own assessment of the damage they'd caused. Reading their evaluation of how well they'd killed British civilians. It was very strange, she said years later, reading the enemy's mail while they were actively trying to kill you. The real breakthrough, the moment everything truly changed, came in stages through 1940 and 1941. More bombs being built, better cribs being developed, captured code books from German weather ships and U-boats that gave them the settings for specific days. And each advance opened new windows into German operations, let them see deeper into the enemy's thinking. They began reading Luftwaffe Enigma reliably by mid-1940, and during the Battle of Britain, when German planes were attacking every day trying to destroy the Royal Air Force, Fighter Command received what they called ultra-intelligence. That was the code word for information derived from Enigma, and they got warnings about German air raids coming. Not every raid, not with much advanced warning, but enough to help them position fighter squadrons better, to avoid being caught on the ground, to know when the really big raids were coming so they could be ready. Then came November 14, 1940, a date that would haunt everyone at Bletchley for the rest of their lives. The decrypt arrived that afternoon, and it revealed a major Luftwaffe operation planned for that very night, targeting Coventry, an industrial city in the Midlands. And it was going to be massive. Over 400 bombers carrying incendiaries and high explosives. A raid designed to utterly devastate the city. Churchill faced an absolutely impossible choice, a decision no leader should ever have to make. Warn Coventry, evacuate the entire city, move fire brigades into position, and get ready. But if they did that, German intelligence would investigate. They'd wonder how the British knew, and they might realize that Enigma was broken, and the entire intelligence advantage, this incredible weapon that was helping win the war, would vanish instantly. Or option 2, say nothing. Let the raid proceed exactly as planned. Protect the source at all costs. The historical record isn't completely clear about exactly what Churchill knew, and precisely when he knew it. But the raid happened. Over 500 bombers dropped 600 tons of bombs on Coventry that night. 568 people died. The beautiful medieval cathedral was completely destroyed. Thousands of buildings were gutted and burned. At Bletchley Park the next day, they read the German after-action reports, detailed assessments of the damage they'd inflicted, self-congratulation on how successful the operation had been. And the Codebreakers knew, they absolutely knew, that they could have warned the city, and they knew they hadn't, and they had to live with that knowledge. Peter Hilton, a young mathematician at Bletchley, spoke about this years later and said, "We knew things that would make your hair stand on end. Absolutely terrifying things, and we couldn't tell anyone. We couldn't even really tell each other. We just had to know it and live with it, carry it around inside us." The whole nature of the war changed dramatically when Germany invaded the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941. Hitler had issued Führer Directive Number 21 back on December 18, 1940, laying out his plan, saying the German armed forces must be prepared to crush Soviet Russia in one quick campaign. And that directive had gone through the Lorenz cipher system, which Bletchley hadn't broken yet. But once the actual invasion started, all the operational orders flew through Enigma, And those orders revealed something much darker than just military strategy, something truly evil. The Einsatzgruppen, these mobile killing units, followed the Wehrmacht into Soviet territory, and their reports went through police Enigma channels, which Bletchley was reading by late 1941, and these reports were bureaucratic, precise, and absolutely horrifying. So many Jews killed in this town, so many partisans executed in that village, just cold numbers describing mass murder. The Codebreakers were reading genocide as it was actually happening, reading the Holocaust in real time. And there's no record of anyone at Bletchley refusing to work after reading those decrypts. The knowledge seemed to make them work even harder, work longer hours, push themselves further, because they were reading pure evil, and the only response they could give was to help end it faster, to shorten the war, and stop the killing. But the most difficult cipher of all remained completely unbroken. Naval Enigma. The German Navy used 4 rotors instead of 3, and changed their settings much more frequently. And the Atlantic U-boats were absolutely strangling Britain, sinking merchant ships faster than they could possibly be replaced, cutting off supplies, threatening to starve the entire nation. In 1941, Britain was losing the Battle of the Atlantic badly, and without breaking naval Enigma, the Codebreakers could only watch helplessly as ships went down. The breakthrough finally came not from mathematics, but from capture, from bravery at sea. On May 9, 1941, the Royal Navy forced a submarine called U-110 to surface south of Iceland, and a boarding party seized the submarine before the German crew could destroy their Enigma machine and code books, captured it all intact. The materials they captured gave Bletchley exactly the settings they needed, the keys to unlock naval Enigma, and within weeks they were reading U-boat traffic, seeing where the wolf packs were gathering, and convoy routes could be adjusted to avoid them. U-boats could be hunted down, and the impact was immediate. Sinkings dropped, more supplies got through, Britain could breathe again. Then, in February 1942, disaster struck. The Germans introduced a brand new naval Enigma variant with additional security features, and Bletchley went completely dark, couldn't read anything for 10 long months. Sinkings spiked to absolutely crisis levels. Over 600,000 tons of shipping lost in November 1942 alone, and the Codebreakers worked frantically, desperately, trying new techniques, building more bombs, pushing themselves to the limit. Finally, in December 1942, they broke back in, cracked the new system, and the Atlantic battle turned again, swung back in favor of the Allies. The Codebreakers were beginning to understand something profound. They weren't just reading messages. They were reading the war's entire nervous system, the brain of the German military machine. Every German decision, every order, every situation report flowed through Enigma at some point. And if you could break enough messages fast enough, you could literally see the entire war machine operating in real time, watch it thinking and planning and moving. By 1943, Bletchley Park employed 9,000 people, most of them young women recruited from universities, trained in absolute secrecy, assigned to incredibly specific tasks that they performed over and over. Some operated the bombs, some did traffic analysis studying communication patterns, some translated the decrypts from German into English, some indexed and filed all the intelligence so it could be found and used. The operation had become industrial in scale, a factory for breaking codes. The bombs ran 24 hours a day in long huts built behind the mansion, each machine testing rotor positions continuously until it found a possible setting, and then it would stop. And the operator would have to test the setting manually, and usually it was wrong, just another dead end. And the bomb would restart and continue the search, over and over and over. But when a setting actually worked, when the gibberish suddenly became clear German text, The operator would feel this incredible rush of achievement, this moment of triumph, and then they'd immediately move on to the next message, because there was always another message waiting, always more work to do. The highest level intelligence, the really crucial stuff, came from a completely different source. In 1940, British intelligence learned that the Germans had developed a brand new cipher system for Hitler's personal communications to his field marshals, his top generals, and this system, called the Lorenz cipher, was far more complex than Enigma. 12 rotors instead of 3. Vastly more possible settings, exponentially harder. The Germans called it Geheimschreiber, which means secret writer, and breaking it seemed genuinely impossible, beyond what anyone could achieve. But John Tiltman, one of Bletchley's most talented codebreakers, found a way in through pure brilliance and a lucky break. In August 1941, a German operator made a crucial mistake. He sent a really long message through Lorenz, over 4,000 characters, and the person receiving it asked for a retransmission, asked him to send it again. The operator sent it again using exactly the same settings, which was strictly against protocol, but he abbreviated some words differently the second time, changed the text slightly. Tiltman suddenly had 2 versions of the same message encrypted with the same key, which theoretically should have been impossible to exploit, but he did it anyway through months of exhausting work, and he managed to extract the key pattern, figured out how the system actually worked. That gave Bletchley the logic of the Lorenz system, the underlying mathematics, but each message still used completely different settings, and they needed some way to find those settings quickly, or the intelligence would arrive too late to be useful. Tommy Flowers, an engineer from the post office, proposed something that sounded completely insane: building an electronic computer, not a mechanical calculator like the bombs, but something using vacuum tubes that could operate at electronic speeds, process information faster than anything that had ever existed. His colleagues thought he was crazy, told him it was impossible, said there were too many tubes and they'd fail too quickly, and the machine would never actually work reliably. Flowers built it anyway, believed in his vision, and made it real. Colossus, the world's first large-scale electronic computer, began operating in February 1944, and it was absolutely massive. The size of an entire room, used 1,500 vacuum tubes, and could process 5,000 characters per second, which was unimaginably fast for that era. It could break a Lorenz message in hours instead of weeks, and the intelligence it revealed was beyond extraordinary. Hitler's personal directives to his field marshals went through Lorenz. His strategic thinking, his orders for major operations, his personal assessments of the military situation. And Bletchley was reading all of it, reading the Führer's own private communications. They read his directive to hold Stalingrad at all costs, even as the Sixth Army was being completely encircled and destroyed. They read his orders to field marshals in Western Europe about where he expected the Allied invasion to come. They read his instructions about V-weapon deployment, about jet fighter production, about the defense of Germany itself as the Allies closed in. One decrypt from March 1944 revealed Hitler's absolute belief that the Allies would invade at Pas-de-Calais, not Normandy. And that single piece of intelligence was absolutely crucial for D-Day planning, because the Allies knew their deception operation was working perfectly, knew they'd fooled Hitler completely, because they were literally reading his own strategic analysis. The Codebreakers at Bletchley Park never, ever forgot that they were reading orders that would kill people, that their work had immediate life and death consequences. German orders meant German soldiers would move to specific positions where Allied forces would engage them and fight them, and British and American soldiers would die in those battles. Young men would lose their lives, but more would die if the war dragged on longer. If it took years more to defeat Germany, The ethical weight was constant, crushing, always there. Break the codes faster and more completely, and you shorten the war and save lives overall. But you're also reading the enemy's mail, which feels somehow unsporting, even when the enemy is Nazi Germany. Even when they're committing genocide, you're reading about atrocities you can't stop, learning things you can never tell anyone, carrying knowledge that would change everything if it got out, but you have to keep it secret. The security around ultra-intelligence was absolutely total, unbreakable. The decrypt papers were printed on special water-soluble paper that would dissolve completely if you tried to burn it, leaving no ash, no evidence, and they were delivered in locked boxes. They were never copied or duplicated, and after reading them, they were returned to Bletchley Park and destroyed completely. Only a tiny handful of commanders knew where Ultra actually came from, knew the real source. Eisenhower knew, Montgomery knew, senior air and naval commanders knew, but most officers just received Ultra intelligence cleverly disguised as reconnaissance reports or agent intelligence, made to look like it came from spies or aerial photographs. The standing rule, the absolute iron law that could never be broken, was this: never act on ultra-intelligence alone if doing so would reveal the source. Never tip off the Germans that their codes were broken. Before bombing a target that was identified by Ultra, reconnaissance planes would fly over it first, so the Germans would think that's how it was spotted. And before attacking a U-boat whose exact position came from decrypts, a patrol plane would find it and report it. The Germans had to continue believing their communications were completely secure, had to keep trusting Enigma, or the entire advantage would vanish overnight. That discipline, that absolute commitment to protecting the source, held firm for the entire war, never wavered once. Germany never realized Enigma was broken, never figured it out, trusted it completely, right up until the very end, even as the Allies anticipated their every move, countered every plan, seemed to know everything. Churchill received a daily box containing the most important decrypts every single morning, and he called them "my golden eggs," read them obsessively, studied every word. And this intelligence shaped absolutely every major decision: where to send convoys, when to launch offensives, how to allocate precious resources, what risks to take and what to avoid. The British and Americans weren't just fighting the war blindly. They were reading the enemy's entire playbook while they played, seeing the other side's cards in this deadly poker game. The impact is almost impossible to quantify, almost impossible to fully measure. But historians estimate that ultra-intelligence shortened the war by somewhere between 2 to 4 years, saved literally millions of lives, made D-Day possible by confirming the deception had worked, won the Battle of the Atlantic by revealing U-boat positions, revealed German weaknesses that could be ruthlessly exploited and strengths that had to be carefully avoided. But here's the strange thing. At Bletchley Park, the people actually doing the work, the young women operating the bombs and analyzing traffic and translating messages, they rarely knew the real impact of what they were doing. They broke messages. They passed them up the chain of command. They moved on to the next message, and the strategic implications, the actual military consequences, were classified far above their security level, kept secret even from them. Mavis Lever, the young woman who broke the Italian naval cipher right before the Battle of Matapan. She didn't learn until after the war was completely over that her decrypt had enabled the Royal Navy to sink 3 Italian cruisers and 2 destroyers, that over 2,000 Italian sailors had died, while only 3 British sailors were lost. She'd known she'd broken something important that day, known it mattered, but she hadn't known it had changed an entire battle, turned the tide in the Mediterranean. Most Bletchley veterans didn't talk about their work for 30 years after the war ended, couldn't say a single word about what they'd done. The Official Secrets Act bound them to absolute silence, made it illegal to reveal anything, and they'd been part of the most successful intelligence operation in all of human history. And they couldn't tell anyone, not their families, not their friends, not even their spouses. They went back to normal lives, back to teaching mathematics, or doing research, or just living quietly, carrying secrets they would never share, experiences they could never describe. When the story finally became public in the 1970s, when the government finally declassified enough information that the truth could be told, the world learned what these people had actually done. The impossible mathematics, the absolutely relentless work day after day, the crushing weight of the knowledge they carried, the discipline of silence they maintained for decades. Alan Turing, the man who'd made it all possible, who'd designed the bomb and broken Enigma and essentially invented the computer, he died back in 1954, never receiving any public recognition for his work, never being honored as the hero he was. He'd been prosecuted for homosexuality in 1952, subjected to chemical castration as punishment, and was found dead just 2 years later from cyanide poisoning. The nation he'd saved, the country he'd helped rescue from Nazi conquest, had destroyed him, persecuted him for who he was, and he died in obscurity and shame. The others lived longer, survived into old age, but many of them struggled deeply with what they'd known and been forced to keep secret for so long. They'd read the Holocaust as it was happening, read the bureaucratic reports of genocide, read the orders that sent millions to their deaths in the camps. And they'd known things that would have changed public understanding of the war completely, shifted how everyone saw what was happening. But they'd stayed completely silent because the mission absolutely required it. Because protecting Ultra was more important than anything else. Peter Hilton, asked late in his life what it had actually been like to read those decrypts day after day, said simply, "We knew we were reading evil, pure evil described in cold bureaucratic language, and all we could do, the only thing we could do, was try to help end it faster, try to shorten the war, and stop the killing." The physical evidence of Bletchley's work was systematically destroyed after the war ended. The bombs were completely dismantled and scrapped. The incredible Colossus computers were broken up into pieces. Their blueprints were burned. Everything was erased. The government wanted absolutely no trace of this capability to remain. Wanted to ensure that the techniques stayed secret, that potential enemies could never learn how it had been done. The site itself, this place where the war had been won, nearly became just another housing development. Nearly got bulldozed for suburban homes, but the impact of what happened there endured and changed the world. Modern computing traces its entire lineage directly to Colossus, to Tommy Flower's electronic computer built in 1944, and modern intelligence agencies learned fundamental lessons from Bletchley's methods, understood that mathematical analysis combined with industrial-scale processing could break codes that seemed absolutely unbreakable. And the human story remained, lived on in memory. Thousands of people, mostly young, mostly completely unknown, who read the enemy's deepest secrets and never told a soul, who carried the crushing weight of that knowledge for decades, who understood they were part of something so much larger than themselves, something that would change history. When they first read Hitler's actual orders, when they first broke through the cipher and saw German words forming from what had been meaningless gibberish, they felt pure triumph, felt the thrill of intellectual victory. And then they felt the enormous responsibility, the weight of what they now knew. And then they went right back to work because there was always another message waiting, always another code to break, always another secret to reveal. And the work never stopped. The war would ultimately be won by soldiers fighting on battlefields, and sailors fighting on the seas, and airmen fighting in the skies, by brave men and women risking everything. but it would be won faster, with fewer casualties, with less death and suffering, because of what happened in those simple huts at Bletchley Park. Because some young people were extraordinarily good at mathematics and completely dedicated to their work and absolutely willing to carry secrets they could never share with anyone. They read Hitler's orders as he wrote them. They read his generals' reports as they sent them. They read the truth of the war as it actually happened in real time. And they used that knowledge, that incredible advantage, to help destroy the regime that had started it all, to help defeat Nazi Germany and end the Holocaust and save millions of lives. That was what British codebreakers said when they first read Hitler's orders, what they said to each other in those rare moments they could talk. Nothing to anyone for 30 years. Keep the secret no matter what. Do the work without recognition or glory. Help win the war however we can, and then go home and stay absolutely silent, because that's what the mission required. That's what duty demanded. The golden eggs, Churchill's precious intelligence, kept coming right until the very end, right up to the final moments. The last decrypt from German military communications came through on May 7, 1945, the day before Germany's unconditional surrender, and it was just routine traffic, administrative details, the mundane machinery of a dying regime still functioning mechanically until the final moment. Then the machine stopped. The messages stopped. The war was over. And the greatest code-breaking operation in all of human history had succeeded completely, had won absolutely, and almost no one in the world knew it had even happened. The secret was kept. The silence was maintained. And thousands of people who had changed history went home to ordinary lives, carrying extraordinary secrets that would define them forever, that would mark them as part of something remarkable, something that proved human intelligence and dedication could overcome anything, could break the unbreakable and win the war that had to be won.